Hello everyone and welcome to the PhUSE webinar Wednesday for May. I'm Chris Price, I'm the Working Groups Director for PhUSE and I will be chairing this webinar. Our agenda today is a quick welcome from me. Jean-Marc Ferran will talk a little bit around the data transparency, CSS breakouts. Sam Tomioka will talk about SDTM mapping, the project update from there, and Jane Lozano will talk about optimizing the use of data standards, the breakout at CSS that will be taking place in June. And lastly, Matilde Kam from FDA will be talking about a workshop the FDA will be hosting immediately after CSS, which I hope many of you will also be able to attend. So in terms of the board update for this month, really we're focusing a little bit on events at this time, in that coming up very soon on the starting the 9th of June and running to the 11th of June is the PhUSE Advanced, the Computational Science Symposium held in Silver Spring, moving from its normal March timeframe this year to its new home in June. There's 4 workshops that will be taking place, a poster session, and we'll open with 7 FDA keynote speakers. Registration is still open and limited places are still available, so if you are interested in attending, I encourage you to sign up for that as soon as possible. The next event will be the PhUSE Connect in Amsterdam between the 10th and 13th of November. Thank you if you submitted an abstract for that paper. You should be receiving a notification whether that abstract was accepted by the 14th of June, and early bird registration will close on the 29th of July. There will be 19 streams this year, including 2 new streams to look forward to. Moving into 2020, following on from the conference in Baltimore, we will be in Orlando in March next year, between the 8th and 11th. Key dates for your diary is that registration will open on the 1st of July, and a call for papers will open on the same time, on the 1st of July. So it's time to start thinking about your abstracts to submit for the conference. So a quick notification on the next single day event coming up is going to be on the 6th of June in Copenhagen in Denmark, with the theme of Adam Revisited. Registration is now open, so if you're going to be in the area, it will be worth going along to that single day event. Regarding working groups, deliverables are out for public comment for the SDTM and Adam FAQ implementation project. They're looking at best practices for submission of event and adjudication data. So if you want to take a look at that and provide any comments, they'll be most gratefully received. You have until the end of the month to submit comments as part of that period. And also, if you want to volunteer for any PhUSE projects, you can find the full list of projects on the PhUSE website, but please contact working groups at phuse.eu if you're interested in getting involved in any of those. Your assistance would be greatly appreciated by all of the projects there. Lastly, a quick reminder that the next webinar will be on the 19th of June, and that will take place at 10 AM Eastern Time, 3 PM UK time, and 4 PM European time, and the agenda will be announced in due course for that. Just a last bit of admin for this webinar. If you do have any questions, please do submit those in the chat, and we'll hopefully have some time at the end to pass those on to the presenters. So that's all from me, so I will now hand over to Jean-Marc. Jean-Marc, you're on mute still.
Apology. Can you hear me?
We can indeed. Thank you, Jean-Marc. All yours.
Yeah. Thank you. So thanks again, Chris. My name is Jean-Marc Ferran. I lead the PhUSE Data Transparency Working Group, and I will tell you about the sessions we're going to have in Silver Spring in a few weeks now. So first of all, the Data Transparency Working Group. We've been active since 2014. We started very much with defining data identification standards for CD data models. You can see it on the left-hand side. And since then, we've been expanding our activities to Policy 70, to Clinical Data Transparency Toolkit, to reviewing a number of policies, guidance, and materials. And more recently, we've been working a lot on GDPR requirements. And finally, we've started a new project around more practical aspects of data identification with 4 projects in the pipeline. At the CSS, we will be talking about 4 of those sub-projects: data utility, data transparency best practices, and then the 2 topics that we have under GDPR around data collection and safeguard processes. This is the agenda for the 2 days. After the plenary session on the Monday morning, we start by an introduction. There's usually new members joining the session, so we'll do a recap about the working group, the deliverables, and the agenda of the 2 days. I will be running this session together with my co-lead, Liz Roberts from UCB. We're then very pleased after lunch to have an update from the regulators. We will have 2 presentations from Nancy Sager from FDA and Andre Molgat from Health Canada around their initiatives around data sharing, and in particular the regulatory requirements around publishing of CSRs and anonymized CSRs. We will have a Q&A with Nancy and Andre and the participants for this first session. We will then, after the break, discuss the data transparency best practice project, and then the Tuesday we'll be focusing on GDPR and data utility. The first project we're going to be discussing is the Data Transparency Toolkit. This project has been very active for the last year and have produced a poster that was presented last year at the CSS, which really provide a great visualization of all the requirements around public disclosure of data, whether they are mandatory or voluntary requirements. This poster was then extended to a white paper where there is much more details that can guide companies into all those requirements across jurisdictions. And right now, the team is working on the best practices guide, which will give them, which will provide a more, you could say, practical aspects of data sharing and help companies to do this in the most efficient manner, considering requirements across regions. The best practice guide is really looking at every aspect of data sharing, whether it is data sharing through registries, journals, data sharing through the like of Policy 70, or voluntary data sharing through initiatives where researcher can request data and any documents throughout the life cycle of a study or compound that requires to be made public. The group has been looking again at a number of deliverables and documents that are in scope, and the goal for the session at the CSS would be to review the experiences of the working group members around those areas, look at the current draft deliverable and see if there are further suggestions for improvements, and of course look at any areas we may have missed and that will require more attention before we finalize this best practice guide. The second topic will be around GDPR. We have a sub-team focusing on safeguard and process. This sub-team has been running a survey over the past 6 months, and we'll also present the summary of this survey, and is currently using this survey as an input to the white paper that is projected to be completed in August this year. The project is focusing on certain aspects of GDPR and data protection. A number of topics were discussed at the beginning when the project was considered, and these are the 6 categories that have been selected. They've been focusing on process documentation and communication between CROs and sponsors, GDPR requirements implication for past, ongoing, and future studies, long-term approach for archiving and storing data, non-TMS study documentation cleanup process, data sharing activities, clinical data restrictions and data anonymization, and finally, data breach considerations, whether it is considerations around avoiding data breaches or any action that needs to be taken in case of data breaches. So many relevant topics, I think, for the community that have been more and more underlined through GDPR and data protection regulations. The objective for the session would be to probably recruit more members, but also provide an overview of the current working group, do a high-level review of the results of the survey, and finally do an active review of the current draft paper that is meant to be finalized over the summer. The last topic will be around data utility. The goal of the data utility project is to help companies to document better how they have optimized data utility in their anonymized CSR. This is a requirement from Policy 70 and now Health Canada to justify how data utility has been considered, but there wasn't very much guidance on how to do that. So the goal here was really to start with the end in mind and look at what researchers may be doing with the data by looking at different research objectives that we find in the literature, link those research objectives to the different research CSR sections that could support those objectives, look into the anonymization techniques that could be applied, and finally see how those anonymization techniques may end up allowing those research objectives or prevent them to be pursued. And the idea is really to define the data utility scale. It could be quantitative, it could be qualitative as well, but really something that can be used to really evaluate and provide further insight into what can be done with data when it's been anonymized and is ready to be shared. The objective of the sessions will be to present the current deliverable. We will be discussing examples based on published anonymized CSRs and published secondary purpose research that have been using regulatory data, and finally agree on an approach to define a data utility scaling method that will be representative of what can be done with data when it's been released. That was it for now. Thank you, and I hope to see many of you in Silver Spring. And if you have any questions, please, you're welcome to put them into the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean-Marc, and I think it's now over to Sam.
Do you see my screen?
We can, yes, and we can hear you perfectly.
Okay. Hi, this is Sam Tomioka. I'm in the data science group from Sunovion Pharmaceuticals. I have been doing a couple of POC projects using machine learning and the natural language processing in the clinical development space. And I joined PhUSE AI ML team last fall. And I started a new project for data standardization using machine learning. So today I'd like to provide a brief introduction of the current machine learning project on SDTM that we started. Okay, so the agenda is, I will go over the overview of the project team, but I will also talk about the objectives of the team and activities that we are planning to do. So PhUSE ML AI team was formed as a project team in emerging trends and technology PhUSE working group. So our SDTM project is one of the current project in project sub-team. And we have about 50 members in the project sub-team, actually working on 2 ongoing projects. So, we are working on SDTM and also chatbot. And today I'm not going to talk about chatbot project, but I will go over the project we are doing around SDTM. So the objective of the SDTM project is to develop a baseline training and test data for generation of the SDT mapping specifications. And we also like to build a second set of the training and test data for medical event coding using natural language processing and machine learning models. There are a couple of challenges that needs to be addressed before we can really start the hands-on work, and I will briefly discuss about that. Second objective is to optimize the baseline models for SDT mapping and the medical event. So to generate SDTM from the raw data sets, there are many tasks involved, from the raw data review, mapping specifications creation. We also need to do a terminology mapping for medical events, medications, CDISC, SDTM control terminology. And finally, we need to make the programs to be able to generate data sets. So we like to be able to automate the mapping specification creation and the terminology mapping using machine learning. And to do that, we built a task list for the team. So the first is the most important thing is that we have to have a data to work on. So and we need to have a secure data storage for training data and also store the models. And we need a space for collaboration. And we also need to obtain anonymized clinical trial data where we can build our training, validation, and test data set. So we started actually another project only focused on these 2 points. And we are looking for volunteers to help with securing the storage and the collaboration space and acquiring the anonymized clinical trial data. Once we have the clinical trial data, we could start do more hands-on work. But I think in parallel to first 2 items, we could start develop some specifications for the training data, as well as the label, which is the target outputs from the models. And the fourth item on this slide is the data engineering. We expect that some data cleaning has to be done, and some pre-processing has to be done before we can even use for building the model and train the model. Okay, and once the data set is cleaned, we can also start train the models. And the models that we will plan to use are the one I created for the proof of concept. And the proof of concept was actually presented at the CDISC interchange last fall. And we will also put a poster around how the model was built. So using that model, we will train and we will start to optimize the model and evaluate the performance. And we like to do this exercise individually, so we can compete the performance and also optimize and share the solutions. Simultaneously, we like to also explore alternative approach to automate the SDTM mapping specifications and also medical coding mapping. And during the process, we might adapt a better methodology in our model building. So if you are interested in and would like to be part of the project and like to give your time for some hands-on activities, please contact myself. The email is shown here, or you can also contact other machine learning AI team leads listed here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Now handing over to Jane.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can't yet see your screen. Yep, there we go. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jane Lozano. I am one of the co-leads for the Optimizing the Use of Data Standards working group, and I'm going to be sharing with you what the breakout sessions are going to be at the CSS. My other co-lead is Lisa Brooks from Iris Consulting, and it's been a pleasure working with Lisa. We've been co-leads for probably about 3 years now, and we work very well together. The Optimizing the Use of Data Standards working group, really the name says what we do. We work with data standards and identifying the gaps and what can we do to increase efficiencies in our data standards. And now that FDA has the data standards catalog, we also want to work with that and how we can help FDA in giving them the data in the standards that they want us to give them now. The current and published projects. We've had some projects published since the last CSS, and I'm actually trying to figure out, I don't know if you can see this, but how to get this box, there we go, down at the bottom so you can see the whole screen. The best practices for data collection instructions is a project that we will be discussing at the CSS. Best practices for metadata documentation has been published. There's a white paper on what do you put in a define versus what you put into a reviewer's guide. And we know sometimes there's overlap, but this is a very good white paper that is published on the PhUSE site. CDISC implementation primer is still an ongoing project in which we will have a session at the CSS. Clinical legacy data conversion plan and report. We're still working on the ADRG, very, very close to getting that published. The CSDRG has been published and it is available. The template, the completion guidelines, and example documents are available out on the PhUSE site, and that will be the same for the ADRG when that gets published. We've received some feedback from FDA and changes were made, and then we will go through another round of review. Should not take long with FDA, and that we can then have that published, because there's actually some things I want to do with these reviewers guides after we get them published with the legacy data conversion plan. The data reviewers guide in XML is a current project. We won't have a session at the CSS. However, it is moving along, and that team is preparing to do a pilot with FDA this year in taking a clinical SDRG, putting it into XML, and see what FDA can do with it. And they are very willing, and we thank FDA for wanting to do this with us. The Define XML 2.0, completion guidelines, and style sheet recommendations. The style sheet recommendations have been published, and the completion guidelines are very close to being published as well. And I apologize, my computer seems to be moving rather slowly today. I may have to get out of this mode and just go the other route. There we go. I'll just have to go this route. This seemed to be just moving very slowly. What we're going to have at the CSS on, well, first of all, Sunday night, please stop by our booth. The working groups will have booths. It is a little bit of a different format this year than we've done in previous years. I will not be there Sunday night, but Lisa will. So, and any of the working group leads, welcome to come and keep Lisa company while she's at our booth. But please stop by and we can tell you all about the great things that we're doing in our working group. On Monday, the first session will be with the SDTM Atom implementation FAQ project. Then the second session will be on, I'm not going to say this, I think we have the record for the longest names of projects in any working group, but the industry experiences working group will meet, or project team will meet. Then on Tuesday, we will have the CDISC implementation primer project. They will have a session. Then the sessions from 10:30 to noon are really more of discussion sessions. We have the best practices for data collection instructions project. The lead for that will not be at CSS. However, Mary Nielsen from the standards analysis and co-chairing group will be leading a discussion on this project as we've kind of stalled. And we will be wanting to get some new people involved, and Mary will share what has been done so far. The second half of that, Lisa and I will be talking about the creation of a reviewer's guide template for integrated SDTM and Atom. And I will tell you more about that as we go through each of the projects that will be at the CSS. For those projects that we're not having sessions on, please feel free to go out to the PhUSE wiki and you can find more detailed descriptions of each of those projects. The best practices for data collection instructions. As I said, we're kind of stalled at the moment. The team has looked at disposition and adverse events, and we really need someone else to co-lead this. Our projects, we like to have at least 2 people co-lead it. It's a lot of work on one person, and Todd would love to have somebody else to help him, and Mary Nielsen can start giving us some more support after PhUSE. But she, from her perspective, this is very important to her. She's writing standard analysis and code, and if the data, going back to the beginning, if the data isn't collected in a consistent way, then it makes it hard for her to do her work and providing standard analysis and code that we all can use. So if you're available to please come in to this session, and if you have time and you have capacity to participate in this project, please stop by. The next one is the CDISC implementation primer. You can see what the project leads are. This project has been going on for a while, and their hope is to share a draft deliverable at the CSS. This is a great project for those that are new to CDISC and all the things that you have to remember and know how to do. It can definitely be overwhelming with what now we have to provide and what FDA is saying we have to provide from a standardized data perspective. This will be a very helpful deliverable to those that are just starting out with CDISC, and even for those that are knowledgeable in CDISC. There might be some things that you could learn from this as well. And we do have CDISC participation. That's one of the great things with our projects, is some of our projects we do these in conjunction with CDISC. Best practices, the same thing. We want to partner with CDISC, and it's been a great collaboration so far. The next project is our industry experiences, and we will have a session at the CSS, and they're going to create a white paper is their deliverable. And this would be a very good white paper as well, especially when there's some nuances between FDA and PMDA. And to be able to put all that into a white paper and to help guide people, guide sponsors, CROs, TPOs who's ever submitting data to a regulatory authority will be very helpful to everyone in the industry. The next one is the reviewer's guides discussions. As we think about the clinical SDRG and the ADRG, they are really geared towards one study. You create one CSDRG when you have SDTM for one study. You create an ADRG when there's ATOM for one study. What I've been wanting to do for several years now is actually create a template and completion guidelines and example documents for an integrated. I know where I work at Lilly, we take the current SDRG, CSDRG, and we actually create integrated SDTM, which I don't think is common, but we do, and take the current template and modify it to make it fit for an integrated SDTM. And the same is done for the ADRG with integrated ATOM. I would like to see a separate template so that sponsors don't have to go in and change it and figure out, well, what is it that FDA or a regulatory authority really wants to see in one of these documents. I don't think it would be a difficult project, as we can take the current template, which is why I want to get the ADRG published, then we can take that and modify it and build it to be usable for an integrated SDTM and an integrated ATOM. What I see this as is really two different projects, one SDTM, one ATOM, because there are some people that maybe they know more about SDTM but not ATOM, and vice versa. And I'd like to have the discussion and have those that, if they have capacity, could step up and volunteer to co-lead these projects, and then obviously get people that are interested in working on them to do that. I've led several projects within PhUSE, and I've loved every minute of it. I get to know people, the collaboration is amazing, and it's fantastic. I don't have capacity, and Lisa doesn't either, to do this. And we would like to give the opportunity to those that are part of this working group to step up and run a project. That's what we're all about. It's not just certain people doing projects, it's everybody in this working group getting involved and leading a project or being part of a project. We can't do these projects without you, without those that are part of this working group. And this is a very much needed project. FDA has commented on this as well, as you need to have something for an integrated, or you need to put something into your ADRG and CSDRG that indicates that this is for an integrated database. I would prefer to have just a separate project and have a separate template for it, and that makes it much easier for others when they're needing a template to use, that we have one that's consistent and everyone can use. So I'm really, honestly, very passionate about this project, and look forward to seeing everyone at CSS that's coming. And please come to this discussion. All our projects are very value added, and this one especially. The last one is our SDTM ATOM implementation FAQ. This is an ongoing project because we'll never stop getting questions. This group has done an amazing job in collecting questions. It's easy to do, to submit a question, and then putting the responses out on our wiki database. They've also are creating a couple of white papers. One is about adjudication, and that is available, as was mentioned previously, that is available for public review. And then they are also writing an ISS-ISE white paper in progress, which is another reason why it'd be great to have a separate template for an ADRG and a CSDRG. And that once they get further along with that, it will be available for public review, and I would imagine that would happen this year. But if you have a question, there is a way to submit a question, and then it will be answered. And they also are working with the industry experiences group as well, because you could see there's probably some overlap between those two groups, and they do work very well together. And that is for my presentation. I look forward to seeing everyone at CSS. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Jane. We're now going to hand over to Matilda.
Hi, everybody. Just a moment. I'm trying to. Can you guys see?
Just a heads up, Matilda, if you switch to display settings, so we're seeing your notes slide, the notes screen at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So if you go to the top and under display settings, you should be able to switch it around.
Like, maybe I'll just do what Jane did. Like, is this good? Oh,
it's large enough for me.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. I should have tested this before. But okay, like if I go here.
So on that screen there, Matilda, there's display settings, second from the top, and then you should have swap presenter and slide view show there.
Oh, okay,
Perfect.
Cool. Got it. Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank PhUSE for giving me this opportunity to invite everyone personally to the Analysis Data Standards public workshop. This is under a cooperative agreement with the FDA and in partnership with the Critical Path Institute. The Duke Margolis Center for Health Policy will be convening a public workshop on June 12, 2019 at the Thomas Douglas Conference Center here in Silver Spring, Maryland, to consider key implementation challenges and potential opportunities to advance the development and application of analysis data standards. So the lead office for this at the FDA is the Office of the Biostatistics, for where I'm from. And this workshop will fulfill one of the PDUFA 6 goals in relation to enhancing the capacity for the advancement of analysis data standards. Also, feedback from this workshop will inform us on the ongoing and future analysis data standard initiatives at the FDA, as well as strategic planning efforts to improve regulatory review of electronic submissions. So this workshop has 5 very interesting sessions. So I'd like to go over each of those sessions individually to give you a flavor of what to expect if you attend this workshop. The first session is a session wherein the FDA will give 2 presentations, which will be give you the level setting presentations for the day's discussions. So the first presentation will orient the audience on the FDA review process. So what happens to your data submission after it's been submitted to the FDA? So it will highlight also efforts of the FDA with regards to guidance development to support the greater use of analysis data standards, as well as improve submission and review processes. The second presentation will discuss the new integrated modernized review that FDA is starting to pilot with regards to standardizing safety review processes in the Office of New Drugs. And it will highlight how the use of standards improves the efficiency and quality of submission reviews. Now for session 2, this is more of hearing, listening mode for the FDA, wherein we will explore the industry's experience in implementing submission requirements using electronic format with a focus on what are the challenges that the industry has encountered in using analysis data standards, and what are the solutions that have been developed. So actually session 2 fits perfectly with one of the work streams that Jane mentioned on industry experiences in implementing analysis data standards. So it'll be good if you guys come and attend the workshop, and maybe you could speak up during the audience participation portion of the workshop. So again, in this session 2, there will be 2 presentations from the industry, and there will also be a panel composed of different representatives from industry, FDA, and the CRO, and we will be discussing potential difficulties that the sponsor face using standards such as SDTM and ADAM. Also, how can you improve the traceability of data as it's transformed and mapped to SDTM and ADAM standards? And also, how are there opportunities in which we could reduce how ADAM and SDTM standards are implemented? Because at FDA, we kind of experienced that although we have standards, the implementation of standards also varies across the different sponsors. So actually what we're getting is not really standards. So it would be good if we could improve the consistency and quality of the submissions, because then it would make it quicker or more efficient for us to do our reviews. Next session, which is session 3, deals with more, we would like to obtain feedback from the other industries, like academia and nonprofit organizations, and see what are their issues as they implement analysis data standards as part of basic research, medical product development, and in their regulatory submission processes. So we would look at implementation of data standards in original and translational research. What are the challenges they face during the data lifecycle, and what are the solutions that have been implemented in academia to facilitate standard implementation? So that's session 3. Session 4 would now solicit the stakeholders' perspective on what are the key opportunities to improve the processes for implementing analysis data standards. So there would be, this would basically be a panel session for session 4, and we have various representatives, again, from the FDA, from industry, and also from PhUSE. We have Chris Price, who was chairing this webinar, will be in our panel. Here, FDA will provide an observation on the sponsor's use of ADAM standards in NDA, and how the sponsors can leverage the publicly available resources that could assist them in implementing data standards. We also have a panelist from the PMDA, and we would like to learn from them how do they engage and obtain feedback from drug sponsors on data standard implementations in Japan. So this would be a very interesting session, getting feedback from the Japanese regulator in comparison to the FDA. And lastly, session 5 will be dealing more with real-world data and real-world evidence. So here, there has been a growing interest in FDA on how do we leverage real-world data and the real-world evidence for regulatory decision making. So the question is, which standards should be used in submitting real-world data to FDA? Is it the CDISC standard, or should we develop a new standard for it, or do we use HL7? So those are some of the issues that would be discussed in this session 5, and it would, it will be very interesting to hear the different perspectives on this session. And here is the registration information. So again, like Chris said, this is the day after the PhUSE CSS. This is June 12. It's also in Silver Spring. If you want more information, you could go to this website of Duke Margolis. I know it's hard to see and copy. What I'd suggest is you just Google Duke Margolis events, and then you could see a list of events they have, and you'll see the Analysis Data Standard Workshop as one of the events that they are promoting in their website. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Matilde, for that, and I hope that many people on this call will register for what looks like a very interesting workshop. Just a final call for any questions for any of the panelists to send them in via the chat. To give people a quick chance to actually type, I'd like to first thank all of the presenters today for sharing in particular what's coming up at CSS and in their different projects, and obviously in the upcoming FDA workshop. And also a big thank you for all of the contributors to these projects, be they people working on them, leading them, and just to thank all of those for all their efforts. They really do make these projects a success, and it's really important that we continue to be engaged in these and helping driving the industry forward in this computational science space to really try and help them make a difference for patients. So I'm seeing there's no questions, so on that note, I'll close this month's webinar. Thank you all for joining and for listening, and we hope to see you first at CSS and at the next webinar Wednesday in June. Thank you.